You are listening to part 20 of our 24-part series, Marvelous Mints, The Wise Woman Way, with Susan Weed at Time Monk Radio. Hello, Susan. Welcome back to Time Monk Radio.
Oh, thank you, Gemini. We've been talking this month about mentha, about the mints, and about the oceanum, the basils, and now we're going to be talking about oregano. I hope that the wait has been worth it for us to come to these more common plants in the mint family, ones that people feel comfortable and at home with. You go into any pizza parlor in America, and you sit down, there's usually going to be 3 shakers on the table. And what's going to be in those 3 shakers? One of them is going to have some grated cheese in it. One of them is going to have some red pepper flakes in it. And what's going to be in the third one?
Oregano.
Now, I have a patch of oregano that grows right out here in my rock pile. I live in an old quarry, and I have a lot of rock around. And the oregano likes rocky soils. And it covers, maybe a tenth of an acre. I mean, it's a really big patch of wild oregano or wild marjoram. The names oregano and marjoram are used somewhat interchangeably. They are different plants, but then again, there's different kinds of oregano as well. So once again, we find ourselves in the mutable mystery of the mint. And is it oregano or is it marjoram? Well, it can be awfully hard to tell. So I was very excited to have this wild oregano. And the first year that I was here, I harvested some of it and dried it. And I was so disappointed that winter when I went to use it in a recipe because, well, it smelled green and it smelled good, but it really didn't smell like oregano or marjoram. And it reminded me of the wild basil. And there's several big patches of wild basil that grow around near where I live. The wild basil has no smell and no taste of any kind. I don't know if somebody decided to name it wild basil as a joke. It doesn't even look like basil to me. I mean, it's clearly a member of the mint family, and certainly there are strong family resemblances from all members of the mint family. But the wild basil is certainly not an aromatic plant, and the wild oregano is not very aromatic either. The oregano that we're thinking of, the one in that shaker, is more commonly called Greek oregano. And Greek oregano is usually a plant that clings to the ground. Most people, if they go to an herb shop and say, a plant shop, I want to grow some oregano, will be sold the very plant that I have growing wild, Oregano vulgare. And they will be disappointed like I will that it doesn't have very much smell or flavor to it. And so what you want, if you want that oregano stuff, is you want to get Greek oregano. It's a more matting, clumping. People don't like it as much because the Oregano vulgare grows 8 to 20 inches tall. It has beautiful purple flowers when it blooms. It's a pretty plant. It's a sturdy plant. It's a perennial plant. Whereas the Greek oregano, well, of course, it's a fussier plant. But if you remember back to when we were talking about the monardas about a month or so ago, the bee balms, and I mentioned that the one that I like best for tea is the Oswego tea, which is the Monarda didyma, the red-flowered bee balm, and that I use as seasoning the purple-flowered Monarda. And the purple-flowered Monarda is actually kind of a lavender. It's not a bright purple. It's more of a kind of soft purple in the wild one. And in the cultivated Monardas, you can get a very bright purple. And the purple in the flower usually indicates quite a bit of oregano oil in the leaves. So rather than growing a kind of fussy Greek oregano, which, hey, I don't live in Greece, it's not that warm, it's not that sunny here, then the wild purple oregano is now what I harvest and dry and use when I want oregano in some dish that I'm making, in some soup or whatever, and that suits me just fine. I do make a vinegar from the wild oregano that grows, but again, it does not have a lot of smell or taste. So usually what I do is I put a lot of fresh raw garlic in it, and then it tastes a lot like garlic vinegar with a subtle hint of oregano in it. Oregano, like most mints, is considered warming and drying. Maud Greaves said, when you go to buy oregano oil, be aware that it is usually made from thyme. And this is something, again, that we find with the mints, that we may find menthol in this mentha species, but that doesn't mean that's the only place that we're going to find menthol. And the constituents of the aromas and the active constituents in the many, many different plants of the mint family and in the many species within each genus share many constituents. This is one of the reasons that they are so similar in their ability to improve digestion, to calm down the smooth muscles of the digestive tract, to improve the functioning of the liver and the gall, to improve breathing and respiratory things. But again, the oregano is considered, especially in its essential oil form, to be particularly strong. Have you heard of anybody using oil of oregano?
I have. I actually use it myself.
Tell us a little bit about it.
Well, just the other day, because we had a little bit of flu going on here, I put some in a spray bottle with just some water and just kind of sprayed some like doorknobs and sinks and just that kind of stuff, wondering if it would work because of the properties in it. So I don't know if it will, but I thought I'd try it.
So you diluted some oregano oil in some water, put it in a spray bottle.
Yes.
And is that what you did?
I did.
And then sprayed it as an antibacterial.
Yes.
On places where you would spray any other kind of antibacterial.
Right, like how somebody would use Lysol, I used this little concoction that I made.
And was it something besides the oregano oil?
No, I didn't have anything else in it. That's the only essential oil that I had on hand. I didn't have thyme or anything, so I just used that.
And I wonder if the oregano oil that we're all using is made from thyme, as Maud Greaves says.
Yeah, I wonder. I picked it up at Whole Foods, and I'm not sure. I couldn't really tell. It was said like Oregano vulgare or something on it. Oregano
vulgare, that's the one we're talking about, and that's the one that has very little smell. Right?
So, yeah, well, it smelled a little bit like oregano to me, but I don't know how effective it is.
So when Maud Greaves said, if you're buying oregano oil, it's really made from thyme, I thought, you know what? I bet she's right.
Yeah, I probably wouldn't doubt that.
Right. Why not? So the oregano oil itself has a tremendous following. You are certainly not the only person who says, hey, let me spray oregano oil around. As we've talked about, I am pretty loath to use such concentrated things. I would think that, if I'm concerned, that I would probably use witch hazel.
Okay.
Which is a much milder disinfectant. Or I would simply be careful to wash my hands.
Yes, that too.
Right, which, really brings it home that we don't have to be spraying our environment with things that are antibacterial and antiviral, but instead we bring it right back home to it's us. It's our hands going to our nose and our eyes that actually spread those viruses of the colds and the flus. And we can just do a little more hysterical hygiene. Oregano oil has been used to relieve toothache. And I thought that was quite interesting. Clove oil, of course, is the usual one that we think, and we say, oh, you have a toothache, well, you need some clove oil. That'll definitely get rid of the pain. And since I don't like using essential oils, what I usually use is myrrh tincture. And myrrh tincture, also very powerful antibacterial. It is pretty easy to buy and to have on hand if you have anything going on with your teeth. Also, oregano oil has been used to deal with tonsillitis. Now, when I was a child, they just thought that children's tonsils should come out. And that was actually kind of fortunate for me because my tonsils were huge and inflamed and were actually making it very difficult for me to get nourished. But nowadays, tonsils are routinely left in. They're not taken out the way they were 65 years ago. And so you may get a child who gets a very sore throat and an infection in the tonsils. And it would be worth thinking about oregano at that point. Again, remembering that we can make oregano honey, we can make oregano tea. We don't have to immediately reach for that super concentrated oregano oil. If there is, however, a chronic respiratory problem, a chronic cough, a chronic sinus infection, bronchitis, every cold ends in bronchitis, tuberculosis, then oregano oil may be something that we want to think about using. Again, remembering that oregano oil doesn't have to come from oregano. So we talked about doing a mint steam and how wonderfully that opens up the breathing. And we could do an oregano steam. And to get the oregano oil, we could use thyme. Or we could use the Greek oregano, or we could use bergamot, because they all contain large amounts of the oregano oil, often more than the oregano itself has. Oregano oil has been shown to kill lethal strains of E. coli, to kill staph infections, to kill strep infections, and to kill fungal infections, as well as chronic systemic infections, including Lyme disease. Again, we want to be very cautious when we are using essential oils, and especially if we're taking essential oils internally. I'm not so sure that if I was dealing with Lyme disease that I would want to take any essential oil internally. Certainly we have lots of other really solid herbs that can give Lyme disease a black eye and send it packing. And I thought that it was quite interesting that they suggest that oregano oil be very, very diluted before it is used. They suggest 2 drops diluted in a teaspoon of oil to be swallowed, and they remind you that this will not feel good when you swallow it, that your mouth and your throat will experience some stinging, some burning, and some pain. So I think our bodies are telling us something pretty clearly, and that is watch out. Oregano oil has also been used for dealing with athlete's foot and nail fungus. And I know that there's some over-the-counter drug that people take for nail fungus, and I also know in my best pills, worst pills, that they're talking about people dying from liver failure from using this over-the-counter drug for nail fungus. So difficult as oregano oil might be, perhaps it would be better because you're not so likely to have liver fungus. But I know that the American Podiatry Association, in other words, foot people, have put out a warning about putting any essential oil on the toenails. They have apparently cases of people who have used tea tree oil and or oregano oil directly on the toenail and have actually literally melted the toenail and destroyed the nail bed so that the toenail can no longer grow. Well, what can you say? I guess it probably got rid of the fungus, but wow, at what cost? Woo! Some people seem to be allergic to oregano oil, and I was quite amazed by that. And this goes on to say that people can be allergic to anything in the entire mint family, including basil, sage, lavender, marjoram, and mint. I personally have not ever met anybody who's allergic to anything in this family. Have you?
I've not, no.
No, it must be really exceedingly rare. But again, sometimes you wonder, okay, well, we're talking about, people who drink mint tea and so on. Would the allergic reaction, would the physical distress be stronger if you were using oregano oil? And the answer has to be yes, of course it would. So oregano is Oreganum vulgare, and marjoram is Marjorana hortensis. If, however, you were to look at them, you would be very hard-pressed to tell these two plants apart, especially the taller growing varieties with the purplish flowers. We might say that sweet marjoram is a little bit fuzzier than the oregano, but not by much. We might say that the marjoram doesn't grow quite as tall as the oregano, but that would vary according to really where it was. And what we can certainly say is that they are both used pretty much the same. Now, marjoram, to my taste, is quite different from oregano, and it's sweeter. Remember, it's usually called sweet marjoram. And so I think of sweet marjoram as more for children and for cooking savory dishes, and that the oregano is more, for like the people after they come in from pressing the olive oil, all right, that the oregano is the stronger of them. And of course, this is part of the reason why the oregano oil is the big success commercially, because it's big and it's rough and it's tough. An infusion of the flowers of either marjoram or oregano is said to prevent seasickness and have a calming effect no matter what the digestive problem is. From an infant with colic to an older person with flatulence, gastric pain, stomach pain, both marjoram and oregano, just like the mint, have been known to be helpful. Marjoram or oregano tea is a wonderful additive to a bath, especially when someone is deeply upset. If you have dried oregano or dried marjoram on hand, just dump the whole bottle of what you have, it's probably going to be from your spice cupboard, into some boiling water. Let it sit for 3 or 4 minutes, and then strain it out and put the whole thing into the bathtub. This will calm and relax and really help people who are feeling that the world is too much with them, that they have had some very bad news, that they have lost someone dear to them, that they have received a terminal diagnosis. And you don't have to wait for somebody to do it to you. If you're feeling upset in these ways, you can say, I'm taking an oregano bath. Even if I wind up smelling like pizza, so be it. Me, I'm going to take a nice oregano bath. Or if you don't want to get in the bathtub with oregano, you could put marjoram or oregano into a small pillow and use that as a sleep pillow. Both marjoram and oregano are said to help prevent nightmares and to help people who have a difficult time falling asleep. Marjoram has an ancient medical reputation. The Greeks use it extensively, internally and externally. They thought that it countered narcotic poisons. And if marjoram grew on a grave, it meant that the departed was happy. It was the custom among both Greeks and Romans to crown young married couples with marjoram in honor of a joyous marriage. Sweet marjoram was used to make sweet bags and sweet powders and sweet washing water. It was used to scour the furniture to make it smell good, and of course was a strewing herb. The tops of marjoram are sometimes put into table beer to give it an aromatic flavor and to preserve it. And before the general use of hops, marjoram flowers were in much demand for ale brewing. It is said that marjoram and wild thyme laid by milk in a dairy will prevent it from being turned by thunder. And remember, that was one of the first things that we learned about the menthas, about the mints, is that they were believed to prevent the milk from curdling. But the mint was usually dropped right into the milk, and here the marjoram or the wild thyme is laid in the dairy next to the milk to preserve it. The dried leaves or the fresh leaves of marjoram, prepared in boiling water and then poured into a sack, are used as a hot fomentation on any kind of painful swelling, as well as on painful joints from rheumatism or arthritis. Marjoram has become naturalized in the United States, but again, it is the wild marjoram or the wild oregano that has become naturalized, and you're not going to be as happy with it as you think you might. Jamaican herbalists showed me how to make incense with oregano, says one herbalist, and then they used the oregano incense whenever there was a respiratory complaint. So this is a lot like the steams that you and I have been talking about, Gemini?
Yes.
Rather than putting the plant in water and then that possibility of catching yourself on fire if you forget to turn the stove off, they are grinding up the oregano with other things and then burning it like a smudge and using that smoke to help open up the respiration. Oregano comes from the Greek word for joy of the mountain. Oros is mountain, and ganos is joy. Oregano means the joy of the mountain. In ancient Greece, livestock that had grazed on wild oregano were sold at higher prices because it was understood that the meat would be much tastier. There are 50 named species of oregano. And this author, like I, says, Oreganum vulgare will disappoint you. What you want is Greek oregano, and it can be difficult to find. She says, here's what you do. If somebody wants to sell you oregano, simply take a leaf and rub it. If it has a really strong, peppery, tiny oregano smell, you got it. If it doesn't, well, you got Oreganum vulgare, wild marjoram or wild oregano, and it's not the one that you want. Oregano is considered one of the perfect mints to cook with because it neither loses its own flavor in cooking nor overpowers the flavor of other things that are added to the dish. Now, there are lots of plants, some of which are not in the mint family, that are also called oregano. And one of them is called Cuban oregano. Have you met up with Cuban oregano?
I've not.
It's a very fuzzy plant, and it holds very, very well in hot weather. It is, however, in the mint family, but it is more closely related to coleus, which we're going to be talking about next month, than it is related to oregano, although they're both in the same family and they're both mints. And Cuban oregano does have what one author calls a real kick-you-know-what oregano flavor. In fact, we're saying that the Oregano vulgare, the wild one, has hardly any flavor. And you need to look for something that has more flavor, like the Greek oregano. And then that Greek oregano would seem flavorless compared to the Cuban oregano. It is that strong. Just a tiny, tiny amount of it in anything you're cooking will leave you with a tremendous oregano flavor. Oregano grows in China. And in China, it is considered especially useful for helping people who are dealing with colds, especially if there is a fever. They also suggest marjoram or oregano when there is vomiting, dysentery, and when children are malnourished. And I was excited to find that there is actually a homeopathic use for oregano. Remember, we talked about how the homeopaths in general are anti-mint, and they say that mint negates the remedy. So I was quite thrilled to find that oregano actually is a remedy, and I wondered if it was made from the Oregano vulgare, the one that has virtually no volatile or essential oil in it. Because the homeopathic remedy made from oregano is used to increase sexual excitability. I don't know if that actually means that it increases desire or not. The German Commission E says that there are no health hazards or side effects known in the proper administration of oregano or marjoram. And they say that you mix a tea with a teaspoonful of the dried herbs steeped for no more than 4 minutes. Or if you want to make something stronger, and here we could make from something that has good amounts of oregano oil, probably not the oregano itself, we could make an infusion, and that infusion then could be used as a gargle. It could be used as a mouthwash. It could even be used as a dentifrice. We could dip our toothbrush in it. Remember, I was suggesting that if we wanted to have mint to use for headaches, that we make a quart of mint infusion and just kind of tuck it in the back of the refrigerator. Well, you probably wouldn't want to tuck your oregano or marjoram infusion totally in the back of the refrigerator, but like the mint, it will stay good for a very long time. And if you would like to use it to replace the commercial mouthwash that you're using, which does contain essential oils, and of course, even though the infusion of oregano or marjoram will be very strong, it still does not contain essential oils, and so you can safely use it in your dental hygiene routine. Well, here we are at the end of another session and another month of mints. And next month, I am going to bring you some of the strangest, the oddest, and the most interesting of the mint plants. We have had 4 mints this month that everybody knows and loves: peppermint, spearmint, basil, oregano, and marjoram. Okay, we could say that those are 5 if we wanted to be picky about it. Next month, we're going to be talking about mints probably only one or two of which you have heard about. So I look forward to joining you then, and meanwhile, come and visit me at SusanWeed.com. My yearly schedule is up at the WiseWomanBookshop.com, and that's also where you'll find my books. Thanks, Gemini, for being such a wonderful hostess once again.
Thank you, Susan. I'm looking forward to the mints for next month. And this concludes part 20 of our 24-part series, Marvelous Mints, The Wise Woman Way with Susan Weed at Time Monk Radio.